I got interrupted by my kiddo, which is the best kind of interruption. I got interrupted by my kiddo, which is the best kind of interruption. I wonder why sometimes it does that and sometimes it doesn't. Okay. I must have the YouTube window open. I need to make sure it's closed. Mm. My experience during the entire awakening process has been that things come through in layers and in different ways, usually more superficially, uh, through like a knowing or remembering, wisdom, an idea, and then it like pieces of it come through in through experience to be integrated. It's the integration that sucks. Yeah. Okay. So like, and then it gets like it goes deeper and deeper and deeper and into the soma, into the well, okay, it's oof, this is it works both ways. It goes deeper into the soma as it goes deeper into the world. So what happens is, or like what my experience has been, is that I had a very, very clear knowing with a G. I like that's my cute word for gnosis. Just deeply knowing in my bones with no rational evidence um, on many things through the awakening. It's part of the awakening experience. It's part of the mystery. um, and one of those many knowings is, I lost my train of thought. Just give me a second. Mm. I have a lot of excitement energy in me, gratitude, anticipation. I feel it as like a warm buzzing in my torso and like a circulating energy around my chest, like a looping around my chest. And there's also a lot of tightness in my chest, which it's moving. The tightness is moving. It's hard for me to interpret what that is. Well, the way I would interpret it is heart opening. And so, what my direct experience has been is that through the awakening process, it is eventually opening to bringing awareness into the body, into the interstitial tissues, into the I don't know. Okay. So it's related. The interstitial tissues and the sensations that are happening, like in the soma, and it can be anywhere in the body, but I mean, the concentration for me of my awareness is in the torso. And I don't know if that's because I mean, that's where I've been working because my body has been in pain, emotional pain in the torso. Um, I say emotional pain in that there's nothing medically, biologically, metabolically wrong with me that we know of, according to Western medicine. And I mean, I look and feel relatively healthy, other than I have what I would just simply characterize as great sadness or contraction or grief in the body held here. Um, and it's been this process of coming to awareness. So the attention is drawn through the pain, and then the awareness comes and it softens. So now the experience in my torso is one that has more space. And I know all of that might be hard to empathize with because I'm using words to describe what's such a kinetic experience that I have. Um, but and it I'm part of why my heart is opening, and I believe I'm celebrating today many things, but one of the things I'm celebrating today is that I truly am seeing myself being reflected by the culture and in ways that deeply make sense for me. And I am so grateful. There's a video I will share later today, um, from a woman who's sharing her own observations between the difference between the transcendent patriarchal story that is being told by most spiritual leaders today, even the women, which is one that transcends the self and transcends the body and is uh, living in the thought form. And, and we're actually creating technology now that would allow a person to just live in the thought form and just let the body go. Let the body and let the life go, right? Let the external life go. You could live in a box, be locked in, have a mental life that in imagination, and that's another thing that happens through awakening, is there is an awareness that well, the imagination can be way more powerful than we generally yield it. And we can have very, very, very rich experiences through imagination. Now, in my own experiences of imagination, part of the richness of my imagination is the somatic experience that comes with it, which makes it real in that it's embodied for me. Or the memory is an actual like remembrance of the embodied experience. So I don't know how you'd keep that if you let your body just completely shrivel away and whatever, but you could have some sort of experience just in the mind that way. Well, instead, there's another step, which is you bring that awareness that you are not a separate self. You bring it, go the both and way. You bring the awareness that you're not a separate self, that you are divine, or you're part of the collective consciousness, or that we're all one awareness having an experience through these vessels. All of that is true. You know all that, right? You know it, like it's integrated, and then you bring it down into the body and you bring the noticings into the body. And when you do that, you create a whole nother arena of awakening and awareness and noticing and skills. And then you're like, okay, well, what kind of skills do you get? Well, you get nuanced seeing, which leads to nuanced understanding, which leads to whatever your eros, your creative energy is curious about. And that could be led from the intellect, it could be led from the heart, it could be led from the gut, it could be led from all kinds of driving motivations or energies. Um, Let me go back over that because I know that just pointing to head, heart, gut might, to me, all of those have a lot of meaning because there's uh, an actual very clear distinction of what mode of energy is this. And I'm in mixed mode most of the time. My awareness is in my intellect, in my heart, and in my gut. And what I mean by that is that I'm thinking and talking and trying to make structured sense. And I think I'm doing a pretty good job today. Um, in other words, get the right balance. That's part of my practice right now, is getting the right balance of the structure and the flow so that I can be in my feminine, playful energy, nurturing, effervescent, that I can be in that energy and then also be in enough structure that I can take great care of myself and others. It's very simple, really. Because it takes both, yeah. It takes structure and flow to be an effective system. Yeah. So where was I? Celebrating. Yeah. So what I've noticed is that it comes in layers. And so like the first layer being like the mental, like the vision of it. And then we bring it down into the body. Well, and then we can realize it, and we have the skill or the knowledge or whatever we need, both generally the skill and the knowledge to create in a 3D world, like make it happen out here. And then not like all of that happens linearly, like it all kind of happens together, but um in other words, it's not like I get one download of thoughts and ideas and mental model, and then it lockstep goes into um, bringing it in and then having it manifest. It's like a continuous loop. Um, However, truly, it's like it continuously amazes me around like how long some of these lessons take to be like actually seen in real life. Um, to the point where like I had completely like lost hope. Like I wasn't sure if I would ever actually see this vision come to life, even though it makes complete sense to me as an integrated consciousness. In other words, someone who sees herself as connected to all that is and is completely committed to the transpersonal. In other words, what did Michael Levin say? Michael Levin had an interview with Mayim Bialik, and it's been months and I've like resisted watching it, and I don't know why. I guess because I felt like scared about how he would be portrayed in pop culture. And she's pop culture isn't she? Anyway, I watched, or I'm watching, I'm in the middle of it actually. And he talks about the Buddhist idea of there's a light cone of care. And he uses the light cone of care as an indicator of the complexity of an organism. So he gave the example of like, if you said, the light cone of care is, a few centimeters of space and lasts for, a few minutes or whatever, I'd be like, oh, it's probably the organism is probably an insect. And then like if you say the light cone of care is like the, a size of the front of a front yard and lasts about, 18 years, I'd say, oh, you're probably talking about a dog. Um, so it's like he's using this. I've just watched it a few minutes ago once, so excuse me if I'm not explaining it well, but he's using this light cone of care as an indication of like the complexity to indicate like to point to the complexity of the consciousness or the mind, I guess you could say, of the system. I think that's really what's going on there. And I'll correct myself after I watch it again, and if I need to. And within human beings, of course, like what is your light cone of care? Because we can have different light cones of care. If we could be ourselves, because sometimes it has to be just ourselves, like that's all we have. And sometimes it's, a family, a whole family. I care about my whole family. I give my energy, my intellect, my creativity, my eros. Where does your eros go? And everyone's eros is the answer that only you can answer that for yourself. And that's why these guys who go up here and they think they know, which they don't know. No story is true. These guys don't know that no story is true, which is embarrassing because that's a masculine idea, I think. Maybe it's a feminine skill in order to be able to hold it. Or maybe he knows that no story is true in his mind and somehow he's rationalized and twisted it, except for him. He knows. Anyway, they act as if they know and they oppress and they tell people what their path is and how they should be. Well, what I'm here to tell you is that even your light cone of care is your own to determine, and it will shift in different periods of time. One of the beautiful things that I got to learn during my period of grief was that when a person is hurting badly, when they are hurting badly, they don't have capacity to give. They are needy. And it's not a choice. It gets to a point where it's not a choice, where the only choice, the only thing that makes sense is to go inward and feel your feelings and go through the grieving process. Let yourself collapse and take the time, spend the money and the time to cry and grieve and dance and be quiet and feel your feelings and develop your interoceptive awareness and bring what you know to be true through your transcendence and your no self experiences down into the body. And there's many, many, many techniques for that. And that's what I'm celebrating, is that I'm seeing that reflected in me. I found a woman last night who was describing that beautifully. She was part of a cult, or what she calls a cult, Benhito. Masoro. I did not know of this guru before I found a series by Mark Vicente, who I've known through uh, the Vow series responding to me. No, 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 thank you. I don't know if you could hear that, but I just had a conversation with Siri, who responded, was listening to me and thought I wanted to call someone. Uh-oh. Anyway, um, Mark Vicente does a podcast or a YouTube channel called WTF is on my mind. And he's doing a mini series on this guru, Benhito Musaro. I'll check the actual name. And I'm very interested in cults and high control groups. I'm an industrial and organizational psychologist, and I've been studying leadership and what I would call group harmony in co-creation since the early 90s. I have a doctorate from Georgia Tech in that area, and I've been most interested in conflict resolution. And so high control groups are fascinating to me. I also was recently accused of being in a cult by my family. And that's an interesting story too, but I'm not going to go into that today. But all of that has, it's part of why I'm here, I think, is to really understand how this happens. And I basically lived in it, a similar experience that I was not a cult, or at least if it was a little bit culty, then I was responsible for its little bit cultiness, because I was a co-leader of a group that was toying with some of this philosophy that this woman explains, that is communicated in much of the spiritual community, which is you're supposed to transcend, you're supposed to go, beyond the self, drop the ego, be here. And oh my gosh, you there and I have something to add to this conversation too, is that that's real. Okay. That experience of being up here and dissociated, or that's just a label that is needs a lot more nuanced and understanding. But uh, in some state of alternative consciousness, like Jeffrey Martin maps for us, that is real. And it's not, when you're in it, it's not, you're not making the same choices from the same consciousness as you were. And so like a person like Benhito, he's probably gone. His consciousness probably can't come out of that. And I would like to talk to that a little bit, because that was my experience when I was in samadhi. It wasn't like I was sitting there going, I want to hurt my family. I want my family to feel like I've left them behind, or I'm ignoring them, or I'm prioritizing my needs over theirs. And I didn't even feel like I was prioritizing my needs over theirs, because and wasn't aware that they were feeling that I was. All of that was just outside of my awareness, because I was in an alternative state of consciousness. I was in a altered state of consciousness. My sense of self wasn't, it was permeable back then. Anyway, I've seen this reflected to me in the larger culture, and so I'm celebrating. And this woman talks about her experience with this guru and how he teaches this philosophy of non-duality. And I know what that non-dual experience feels like. I mean, like I had spent I spent a considerable amount of time in samadhi state, and I have lots of recordings of me from that place. And now I'm a visitor. I consider myself a world bridger. Um, God, I'm so grateful. One of the fears when we're going through this process is that we'll never be able to find that again. That peace beyond all words. And I no longer believe that. I can't say that I experience the peace that I was experiencing when I was in the samadhi state, not at all. And my life is objectively less stable, which brings in fear. So it's hard to compare, but I definitely know that I can come more or less into different states of awareness. I call it world bridging. Jeffrey Martin talks about this too. And one of the worlds to bridge is the interior world of the interstitial tissues. And the contraction that we hold in our bodies, and I don't know if it's every human being holds contraction in their soma, but it sure does appear so, because the contraction in the soma is associated with I want to say dysfunctional behaviors, but I'm putting an evaluation on a set of behaviors that have a function. Um, the function is adaptation to survive. It's the patterns over space and time that we start to see what's wise and what is foolish over space and time, over space and time. That's why wisdom takes age in some ways, takes age in some ways. Not that there's lots of wisdom in youth, clearly, clearly. And like some of this, when you break through and you have these experiences and you know with a G in the bones, you can have that in any age, but then the skill to how to manifest it in the world might not be in the soma, in the body, a learned skill yet. It's a learned skill. And the way so integration is now, I would say the integration is that process of bringing that uh, knowledge of that comes through of the higher self um, down into the soma, and it's actually a physical experience to do that. If when okay, when does the physical challenge come? The grief. Oh, okay. So the grief comes when what we know in our bones meets the challenge of reality. All right. Okay. So, feeling a lot here. Okay, what do I know in my bones? What example can I give you? What do I know in my bones that is being challenged by reality? Um, how about love is real and that I'm capable of experiencing it in a very big way and be like a basically like generative ball of energetic love. Um, and I know that to be real. And then I am not able to access it. Okay, there we go. So I know there's the possibility of that. I know love is real. Why? Because I've seen the evidence of being in a state of love that's been self-generating at least enough within the conditions that I had built for myself. Everything exists within a container. So with the proper structure that allows the continued flow of energy, I've had the experience of being in that regenerative place. And that is a very secure place to be because that's when humans who are in that state have that experience of, oh, I'm okay, I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay no matter what, because love is in me. Love is in me. It's in me. So I will always have love in my life with others, or because I have it with me. That is a fundamental perennial wisdom right there. Cannot be scientifically tested or falsifiable, I don't believe. And it is something that when you experience that state, and especially, I'm talking to you about, I had an experience that I name as samadhi, so it was for extended periods of time. Like that samadhi state, I'm sure it was ebbing and flowing in depth, but it was persistent from 2020, October of 2020 to sometime, I think around 2024. I just had so many blows to my trust in the universe because, okay, like basically samadhi, what is samadhi? It's surrendering. It's surrendering to the creative flow, which only makes sense. It only makes sense from that perspective, from that point of view. It only makes sense to surrender to creative flow. However, the human who surrenders to the creative flow is going to be experiencing pain when challenged. And those challenges are societal and systemic. I guess maybe I don't know. I'll have to think about that some more. Mm. So I'm celebrating being reflected in the culture as an embodied, awakening, divine feminine, wounded feminine, divine masculine, wounded masculine, all of it, all of it. I'll claim all of it, all of it, claim all of it. Because what we're going to need to do is be our unique selves, accept with an A, that we have all of it, that none of us are perfect. We have wounded energy in us. Nobody is exalted. That's the problem. That guy is lost in his story. And he's created such an identity around it. I don't know how he could ever come out of it. It would be so painful. But, the truth is a lot of us have pain coming out of our identities, and that's why there's suicide. I don't think I'm supposed to say that word. I really need to learn the etiquette on YouTube and the terms and conditions if I'm not supposed to say certain words. I just hear a lot of people substituting words with other things like unalive. Anyway, I believe a lot of unaliving is coming from hopelessness that I can't shed this false life. I'm trapped in this false life, and it goes deep because it's my false identity that's holding it up. I mean, people like get that lost, like what they're describing Benito. And again, I don't have direct experience with him at all. I've watched a couple of his videos. I don't find him appealing because again, I've outgrown that idea that that's where we're supposed to stay. We are supposed to go there on the way, but you don't stay there. You bring it in, but this part's hard and painful. And pain is coming from the challenge of what shows up in real life. So, yeah, yeah, deep, deep, deep learnings and deep celebration of seeing that being reflected and noticed by others, and then finally starting to see some magic moments that my new awarenesses are able to allow. My live stream was interrupted earlier because my kid called through FaceTime, my adult kid. And we had a delightful connection that the pattern that I noticed is that we have a delightful connection and create some closeness, warmth, and intimacy, which Mama, me, has an endless capacity for and also desire to experience with my child. So, I know I'm always holding that side of things and being very gentle and loving. Um, Not to like cross that boundary of intimacy, knowing, I'm the mom. So, but my experience is that generally we do experience some closeness because we love each other and we have such a good rapport. Um, and then I say something gets that activates. I say something and then suddenly there's tension in the field and there's a struggle, I think, and I think it's Ezra, my kid. I'm feeling bad about talking about them. I'll stop as soon as I finish this. Um, that my kid is signaling a boundary. I mean, that's it. That is it energetically. That is it energetically. And then at that moment, I can, what can I do? I can respond. And if we are simply mindlessly playing off each other's signals, so like I gave an approach signal and she came back and gave an avoid signal. And if then I kept going approach and she gave another avoid, I'm not listening. So instead, I maintain the connection in a loving way. And we were able to come back and reconnect and end the call pleasantly in love. And that feels really good. And so I'm celebrating that too. I've had to learn a lot through this spiritual awakening process. First of all, I had to learn that we actually are all connected. That was the first lesson. The second lesson was just because I have this knowing of what's possible does not mean that I have the skill to make it happen in the world. One of the big epiphanies that I had in October of 2020 was this idea of leader as team, so that leaders are now no in the future, leadership wisely will not be one person claiming, I know. Um, it's going to be a culture. And in the culture, how is the culture going to be created? It's going to be co-created. It's being co-created around a vision that will be enacted by a group of people who all share the same values of process as well as outcome. So they'll all be like, we want to make a rocket and we want to make it this way. Or we all have the mission to end hunger. And the way that we're going to achieve that mission is not just their strategy, like out in the world and their mechanics, but like their process. We're going to achieve it while staying emotionally regulated, present, well-being, in a culture of care and concern and growth, where we practice healthy communication skills and treat each other in nurturing ways as human beings. And I know that sounds like really foreign, but that's what we need to do. That would be the culture that I would co-create. But there will be other teams that create other cultures that are not like that at all. Maybe they have completely different values. They don't value like the process by which things happen. Maybe they don't want to be in a relational field. They want to be in a transactional, task-oriented field. Maybe they're the type of people who they're introverts and they like to work alone. So they really want to work asynchronously, and that's their vision. And so those people are building something else. They're not, what are they building? They're building well, they could be building lots of things, a piece of software, designing something. There's lots of tasks that that would be appropriate for. And so maybe that there is a group of people that create a culture that works that way. But no matter, the culture is not dictated by one person, or strategy is not dictated by one person at the top. And I understand that corporations have boards and yada yada. It's supposed to be, but it would look different than the way that we're doing it now in governance and structure. So that was the vision. And then I was like, well, that's what I want. I want collaboration. So can I co-create with a small team? The answer is so far has been no. As a peer, I don't want to lead it. I do not want to lead it. I want to be a peer. And what I find is that I haven't found that right balance of, like, in my experiences over and over and over, I'm leading, first of all, in a way that I don't really want to be. In other words, I have too much control and I don't want it, but I don't know how to grow grow the group. Since I'm the one with the vision, I haven't figured out how to grow the group into a way where I'm not in control. I'm not the one that's always contributing the life force energy into the pot. Um, because, it's not good for anyone. If people like it, I mean, in a certain way, because, like, they don't have to have the responsibility of carrying that load of creating the structure and the format. I mean, it's so nice to just be able to show up to things, right? I mean, in this season of my life, during grief, I have to just mostly just show up to things. Now, because I'm, I guess, a joiner, a community junkie, I love and need community, and community is kind of my bread and butter, my lifeblood. And, you know, I, even in my grief, I've already joined a community and started contributing to one. But I've mostly been receiving, and I've needed to. There are periods where a person really just must receive. And I've been that, and I needed to receive a lot from myself, from my past self. And I received a lot through strangers, basically, who became friends. And I got a lot through some old friends too. Some really, really good old friends. Some really, really good old friends who I love so much. And now I'm finally starting to reconnect with my parents and obviously my kid. But it's been 4 years. 4 years. And a lot of it was because, where I was not being reflected back in my experience, and I was very confused, and I was not being reflected back from my family of origin, of course, who were not going through the awakening experience, and I wasn't being reflected back through the community that I joined, which is the one that I was part of a leadership team. That was one of the experiences of leadership as team, co-creative team. It did not work, but it was one of the many experiments that I had with that vision. I mean, it didn't work. I don't know. It didn't work for me. I don't know how they felt about it. I don't know if they continued with that the model we were working with. But the model we were working with now, it's been years. Okay, so that was back in 2022. So it's been 4 years. And I really was doing the bulk of that work in 2021. That we were experimenting with a co-creative leadership type model. But, well, the most compassionate story wasn't written back then. So I didn't have the details on how you could actually create even a culture that would allow for the type of transparent communication that would be necessary for peers to co-lead together and not get into a power struggle. And the thing was, it wasn't so much that we were in a power struggle in that group. It was that there was just an automatic built-in power differential, which wouldn't work. It was fundamentally flawed because one of the members of the team was the one that was putting all the money into it. So ultimately, even though we were trying to say that we were going to have shared decision control about certain things, ultimately he had decision control and he would usurp decision control from the leadership team. And he had the money. So ultimately he had the power. And yeah, we would of course talk to him about it. But what he didn't have was the wisdom to understand that pattern that he's perpetuating of taking over decision control has consequences over space and time. And that he needs to decide if that consequence over space and time is going to result in the vision that he has for himself and for the world. And maybe it does. That's the level of consciousness that I'm asking people to step into. And I mean, I was, of course, the voice that was being like, patterns, sustainable, what's going to work in the long run. Because I was old. But I mean, to the guy's credit, he had me, who was in her 50s, and another woman who was in her 50s, and we were both very competent and wise. We really were. And also, I think both of us confused and trying to figure out like what's going on here. And I mean, for me, I was brand new into I was basically brand new into awakening. I'd awoken into presence, meaning I had that perennial wisdom knowing and that experience of feeling connected in varying depths since 2018. And this is 2021. So it wasn't very long. And I hadn't been exposed to New Age spiritual communities. This definitely would fall into that. We were secular spiritualists, I would say, like leaning on agnostic and unknowing about the true nature of the universe. Um, and interested and curious about all the stories, and basically working around the question of, well, there's definitely something real here around, connection to all that is, and connection, and and the energetic experience, and wisdom, but we don't really know what that is. I mean, the whole philosophy of the organization very much fit me in that way. Um, but everybody who is going through the awakening path is trying to go through a process of deconstruction where they are seeing all the stuff that they believed was uh, true, with a capital T, and inarguable, maybe even foundational to their identity or their like choices in life, and looking at it and saying, what is this? Is this helpful? Does this still fit in my value system and my desires? And does it serve my eros? If not, okay, well, let's soften it. I think instead of asking people to let stuff go, ask people to soften, because like the one of the awarenesses that comes in, and why this ends up being so repulsive to people like me and the woman that was talking yesterday that I identified with, or I saw myself reflected through, is that it's not really an instant choice. It's a choice, but it's a choice over space and time. Sucks, right? So like where he says, just let it go, drop the feeling, choose to do something different, choose to think different. And what we notice is when we bring it into the body's having these responses actually first, 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 before there's conscious awareness to choose differently. So, and this is actually scientifically supported. In my cat video, I put a link to a study. That's an old study. There's got to be a ton of research since then. But what we see through empirical studies, uh, that looks at the connection between the soma and the MRI resonance that is looking at neuronal patterns, is that when we are noticing patterns that have consequences for us. This is the sum of it. Noticing patterns that have consequences for us, the body responds first before the mind has the thought. So we are developing your sisters, dear brothers, because I think it's mostly women who are brave enough to go in here and do this work. Your sisters are going in here to start noticing those signals earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier. And brother, brother, that it's infinite. Yeah. The moment. Thank you. Thank you for celebrating with me.